Bramwell Tovey is in his element when he sits down to play piano with musicians or when he stands in front of them, baton in hand. He is a conductor and composer who keeps the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra on the magical musical page. He can play the tuba too, which could have something to do with his Salvation Army roots. Composer Tovey's full-length opera, The Inventor, will premiere at the VSO in June. And it is my pleasure to welcome Maestro Bramwell Tovey back to Studio 4 to tell us more.
Hi, Fanny.
Hi.
I'm not sure I would be able to get a note out of a tuba these days, but I did when I was a boy play the tuba, that's true. But I haven't done for 40 years.
40 years?
Yeah,
I see.
Time. Long
so
time.
That's why you didn't bring your tuba.
You really wouldn't want to hear it now, I don't think, no.
But it was your first instrument of choice.
Well, it was. I learned the piano first, but then playing in the Salvation Army band, you had to have an instrument, but the tuba was my instrument. And actually, it was wonderful because in addition to playing other instruments, I was able to sit at the back of orchestras and watch, observe what was going on.
And pa.
Well, yes, I mean it's a little more complicated than that, but that's the street cred for it. Yeah.
Sure. Well, and there aren't too many pianos in the Salvation Army band.
Not in the band, no, not in the band. But you do get a certain element of piano playing in the Salvation Army services. So it's I was a very lucky guy.
Now, your opera writing skills, your opera composing skills, did you go to school to learn those, or was this a happy accident?
Well, it's a combination of both things, really, because to write an opera, you have to have a lot of energy because it takes a long time. It took 3 years. You have to have a lot of commitment to the idea, the primary idea, the plot, the story, the depth of the piece. It's a huge process. And I think it's something that I've always wanted to do. And then the commission came from Calgary Opera, where the full stage version was premiered last year in January. And so this is an opportunity for a second hearing, and of course to have the great VSO playing the orchestral parts. So it was, it's a huge thing, but it's very richly rewarding for a composer to approach a project like that.
And where did you stumble across one of Canada's famous con men of the 19th century?
Well, Alexander Keith Jr., who was the nephew of the famous brewer, who was wares I'm sure we've all observed over the years, either first-hand or second-hand. Alexander Keith Jr. was a notorious criminal. In fact, he was an early terrorist, but his story is very little known these days. So there's a wonderful book by an American academic called Anne Larrabee. She had been researching a completely different topic in Bremerhaven when she came across this wad of papers from the Pinkerton Detective Agency and realized that a Canadian was responsible for blowing up an ocean-going liner in 1874 that killed almost 100 people, maimed hundreds more. It was labeled the crime of the century in 1874, but of course we've had world wars, to say nothing of the Titanic disappearing down the tubes since then, so it sort of fell by the wayside. But the lessons of the opera are pretty profound. They're to do with con men. During the middle of the compositional process, Bernie Madoff's story crept up. They're to do with spousal abuse, with deserting children, terrorism, murder. I mean, it's a pretty rich tapestry.
No kidding. One devious criminal, and he, as all good operas do at the end, he comes to his demise, does he not?
He comes to his demise realizing the error of his ways. And this is actually what happened in real life. When Alexander Keith Jr. saw that he had blown up this liner, he went back down to his cabin on the ship, the blown up ship, retrieved a revolver and shot himself. But because this is the stuff of opera, it was fantastic. He didn't manage to kill himself straight away. He survived for another 5 days, long enough to be cross-examined before he died.
I see, and so, to reflect on
his
bad
So it's
deeds.
The perfect stuff of opera, you know.
It sure is.
Yeah.
But he in real history, did he plant a bomb on the dock or on the ship? Was it a bomb?
First of all, he insured a barrel full of dynamite as gold, so the weight of it was incredible. And the idea was that when it went to the bottom of the sea, he'd be able to claim on the insurance. What actually happened was that as the dynamite was being loaded onto the boat, he had a very primitive timing mechanism. He'd asked a clockmaker called Fuchs in Dresden to build a special clock for him that would hit a detonator after 7 days. But it went off prematurely when the load slipped, it crashed on the dock, it killed and maimed all these people. So it was really a sort of
a disaster.
Absolute disaster of the first
And
magnitude.
he saw it happen, and then he felt badly, I'm thinking.
Well,
that's what
been caught because people realized what was being loaded at that time. But I think he probably thought, after a lifetime of conning, and actually he'd been a very successful con man, but he realized at the end it just wasn't possible to sustain it anymore, much in the same way that Madoff did 2 or 3 years ago.
So Bernie had a mentor, so to speak.
As it were, yes.
Yeah.
Not the best kind.
Not the best kind. 140 some years ago, then he would have committed suicide. Would that be right?
That would be yes, you're doing the math very well.
So, the music part.
Yes. Oh, yes, that. Yes.
That would be you.
That would be me,
It's such a
yes.
great story
Yeah.
and good opera story.
Well, it's great because you have, first of all, you have this con man, and like all con men, he was very popular. Everyone wanted to believe in him. Everybody wanted to believe that he was actually a good person, that he wasn't the bad person they suspected. To one of his families, he was the model father. To the other one, he never even met his children.
I see.
He left a girl destitute in New York, but he married another woman who had 3 children with him. So he was this blend of characters, and because he had this blended personality, for a composer it's fantastic because you can have the high drama of his aggressive side, and you can have the softer side of him being a very doting father on his second family.
Or a good lover, perhaps.
A good lover.
Busy,
but you know, my opera
how about
didn't
a
go,
busy lover?
A busy lover, certainly.
Yes.
Actually, we didn't go to the good lover stage. You know, opera gets too long anyway. So, but there's plenty of blood
Just
and guts.
too much.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Now, this famous maritime brewmaster, the Keith, he was the nephew, right?
He was the nephew of Alexander Keith,
Alexander
the brewer.
Keith, the
That's
brewer.
correct.
Okay. Wow.
Fresh immigrants from Scotland in the 1830s.
Yeah, so what did the family say about this? Or
Well, they regarded him as really a rogue element, very much so. They tried to protect him from prosecution because of some of his earlier crimes of a much lesser nature, although he was once accused of murder and got off. And when Halifax became too hot for Alexander Keith Jr. during the American Civil War, he'd been a Confederate spy, he was a smuggler on behalf of the Confederate cause.
Right.
A family drummed him out of town. The creditors and all kinds of vengeful assassins came after Keith. He escaped to New York. They caught up with him in New York. He escaped to a little town called Highland in Illinois, which is about 35 miles outside St. Louis, Missouri. I went and had a look at Highland when I was conducting in St. Louis, and it's just a tiny little Swiss German place
Right.
even today. He learned to speak German there, and then when they caught up with him in Highland, Illinois, which they did eventually a few years later, he escaped to Dresden and became a pillar of the American expatriate community just by changing his name. So, interesting character all around.
Yeah,
Not the
all
sort
around.
of person you'd buy car insurance from.
No, probably not. So when you sit and watch an opera you've done, do you get to do that? Or are you conducting
usually I'm
and
conducting,
doing other
but I mean,
things?
I did sit
Let's
and
say
watch
if you
rehearsals.
weren't.
Yes,
You're
yes.
in Calgary.
Yeah.
And you get to sit in the audience, do you?
In Calgary, I had to conduct.
You had to conduct,
Which
okay.
actually, but I did actually sit and watch rehearsals, of course, for a month before we began with the orchestra.
And what's that experience like for you?
Well, it's thrilling.
Because it's yours.
It is. It's having an opera. I mean, I've got 3 kids, and you have your kids, you do the best for them, and then you send them out into the world. And of course, it's nothing like that experience, but it is the same kind of set of hopes and expectations in a way. You write the piece, you hope that it's going to have some legs, and when people display interest in it, it's always very, very nice. But really, when I watch it, there are a couple of places where I'm just a little bit uncertain whether I got things quite right. But you have that feeling of fulfillment, because
Right.
it must be rather like standing and looking at a canvas after you've finished a large mural or
Very much
a
so.
large painting, and you only ever get to see it when it's finally free of scaffolding.
And then you listen to all the people Twitter about it.
Oh yes,
You
well,
know,
yeah,
you have to take that.
I'm not into the whole Twitter thing. That doesn't turn my crank. So I tend to worry about that. The biggest critic anyway is inside here. Anyone who works in the arts or really in any field successfully knows that actually
Yes.
your inner critic is the worst one.
And great artists tell you when they complete a painting, it's really their soul on canvas. I mean, it may be a picture of a horse, but it's really their soul on canvas.
It is very much. It's all art, whether it's music or literature or painting, is an expression of an inner narrative. And so we've all got those inner stories, and that's really what music is all about.
Yeah, who said it? Music is the electrical soil in which the spirit lives, thinks, and invents.
Oh, I haven't heard-
Beethoven, maybe.
I actually didn't know that quotation.
You didn't?
No,
So
I-
it wasn't Beethoven, because you
No,
remember what
well,
Beethoven
it might
said.
well be Beethoven, but I don't know that one.
Well, I got it out of the brochure for the Vancouver Symphony Music School.
I guess I should read our own brochure, shouldn't I?
Well, I guess. But that said,
Yeah.
I'm not sure who
Yeah.
said it, but it was Beethoven.
Ah, oh, there, that's
It was,
very cool.
because on my little cheat note, it says here, Beethoven said.
All right.
There you go.
Well, there you go. We're very proud of the school, and we actually have outside we have a mural of Beethoven's Ode to Joy, which is a piece played by amateurs and
Yes.
children and professionals. And so it's obviously the connection for Beethoven is, with Beethoven is most people's first point of entry for a symphony.
For sure. So the symphony school, or the music school, right by the Orpheum, right?
Exactly behind, yes.
Exactly behind.
Yes, by the
Who can
stage
go
door.
there?
Anyone can go there. So
Old,
we've-
young?
Old and young. My wife and I were in a restaurant in Whistler over the summer. We saw a little family. They had a 5-week-old baby, and the parents were going to the school. The 5-week-old baby was going to the school. And it's wonderful because there are people there who are relearning, people who are learning an instrument for the first time, and yet people can come to the orchestra. They can bring their children to a class, a youth class. So it's really for anyone. The only thing we don't do is undergraduate degrees, because that's
Okay.
already done very well by UBC and the Vancouver Academy. And so we're seeking to be a community music school that's dedicated to excellence for the potential professional and also for any citizen.
Sure. So do the students play together, chamber music, all of that? They connect
have
that way?
That whole way of connection. We have a recital hall in there. We have numerous chamber music rooms. We have 19 studios with grand pianos in there. We have a recording studio.
19 grand pianos?
19. We actually have
35?
19 rooms with about 25 grand pianos, because some of
Really?
them have two. So that if you're playing a concerto, you
Yes.
can have a piano next door to you which plays the orchestra part. So every little
How
thing's been thought of.
lovely.
Yeah.
And somebody obviously, did somebody donate? I shouldn't say.
Lots of people have donated to the project, and it's been part of the height density agreement that the city have come up with.
Right.
The developer got greater height on the building for putting a community facility in the basement, and then the developer pays, in this case, the Wall Corporation, who've been fantastic partners with us, and they've helped us build a state-of-the-art music school that we're actually wanting to use now for the benefit of really anyone who can connect with us either online or wants to come downtown. It's an amazing
So an
facility.
aging fiddle player like me
Absolutely,
could go
we
to
have.
the school
Yeah, we have.
and spiff up?
Yeah, we actually. If you really want aging, I think we have some octogenarians. So
Okay,
I think we're doing just fine.
How wonderful. Bramwell Tovey, our guest, he is the director of the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra, as you probably know. And on June 9th and Monday, June 11th, 8 p.m. at the Orpheum Theatre, Bramwell Tovey's The Inventor, the opera. We'll come back.